good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to our webinar on the new communication on progress, where we'll be covering its requirements, as well as useful tips for the preparation and submission. My name is Fabienne, and I am a program manager with the UN Global Compact Network Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And it is really great to see so many of you, so many of our participants joining us today for this webinar, where we will provide you with the relevant information about the transition and the launch of the new communication on progress as of 2023. Before we get started, I would like to cover some housekeeping, which we have a dedicated slide for you. Yes, thank you. So this session is being recorded, and we will make the slides as well as the recording available to you afterwards in the follow-up email. The webinar is held in English, but you may also ask your questions in German or French. And we would also kindly ask to make sure that you're muted during the webinar if you're not speaking, and encourage you to type your questions or comments you have in the chat box that you find at the bottom of this Zoom call window. You may also raise your hand during the Q&A parts that we have in between the sections and at the end of the webinar. On the next slide, please. Thank you. So the UN Global Compact is based on a very robust foundation of 10 universal principles that have been drawn from UN treaties in the areas of human and labor, rights, environment, and anti-corruption. And by becoming a participant of our initiative, your organization has committed to operationalize our 10 principles throughout your operations and value chains and contribute to the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals. Part of the commitment also includes to report on the progress that you're making towards achieving that end via the submission of an annual communication on progress. And we are really excited to announce the launch of this enhanced communication on progress, where we will transition from a narrative format to a standardized questionnaire, which will not only result in improved data that further drives your sustainability progress, but it also aims to enable you to measure and demonstrate your progress to stakeholders, and by this build credibility and brand value by showing your commitment to the 10 principles. It also allows you to identify gaps and set goals that will help you improve performance year over year. For this purpose, we, on the next slide, exactly. For this, here you see an overview of the webinars which have been developed with the purpose to support you in the preparation of this new communication on progress. We have had a 45-minute webinar on how to develop a sustainability strategy, followed by a practical training end of September. And if you're interested in the recording of the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm happy to share that with you. Exactly. And today, our session today will be all about the new communication on progress. And then on the 8th of November, we also have a webinar on the reporting requirements in Switzerland and the European Union. For the implementation of this series, we are pleased to have the team of Elevate with us and supporting us and implementing the series. And I'm happy that today we are joined by Alexandra, who is the Director of Advisory and Strategy and Disclosure at Elevate. And with that, I am delighted to pass it on to you, Alexandra. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Fabienne, for the kind introduction and for inviting us, and welcome you all also from my side. Just in short, Elevate is a global company with a strong footprint in human rights, social and environmental assessments on the ground in all around the globe, in factories, farming areas, with a couple of hundred assessors on the ground. But we also support companies based on this knowledge in identifying the supply chain risks and mitigating these risks, and me personally, I'm part of the advisory branch, and so for Europe, I'm responsible with my team in supporting companies in developing sustainability ESG strategies, and then reporting on their progress, on their actions according to different standards. And in this role today, I'm happy to introduce you in the new communication on progress. So what we're gonna do today is that I will give you a short overview over the communication on progress in brief. Then I will walk you through the questionnaire and providing useful hints and tips how you could approach these sections in the questionnaire. We will have a question and answers session in the end, but please feel free to put your questions in the chat, to raise your hands, and or just to raise your voice at the end of each section. And then I will give you a short outlook on how you could further proceed to comply with these new requirements. So as Fabian put it already, why at all was there why is there an enhanced COP? And I think it's important that you bear in mind that it's really about allowing your stakeholders accessing your information, accessing the information about your performance with regard to the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, your actions toward these principles, and your contribution to the SDGs. It is not a rating, but it should enhance the transparency and the communication with your stakeholders. As such, it fosters your accountability on the sustainability performance. It allows to really show what is your contribution to the UN Global Compact. It promotes the continued learning, because this will be a new feature as well, that you will have it easier to compare yourself with peers, to benchmark, to learn from the others. There are many opportunities of learning in the UN Global Compact in the local networks, but this will be an additional feature that allows you to see how peers are doing. And as such, overall driving your sustainability performance, because it's important. It's not just about complying with any standard, but it should be about really moving forward towards the principles of the UN Global Compact. So having said that, to give you this context, I want to summarize the major changes that that you have to expect. And the first is, as you have certainly heard already, that it's the transition from a narrative sustainability report that you have done according to your own reporting approach with your own words, to a single standardized questionnaire at the digital platform, that you can upload your questions, that every company has the same questions, and as such allows for comparability, but also, yes, to see how you're doing. The second aspect, the new aspect, is that there are no differentiation levels at the moment. So every company is required to give the same depth of information, no matter on size, but as it is a standardized questionnaire, it's much easier than preparing an own sustainability report. There might be the introduction of differentiation levels, but at the moment this is not the case. The third thing is that there's a new system to digitally submit your CEO statement. I will talk about this later on. It's important to know that you can sign it also on behalf of your CEO, but overall it's a pretty easy, straightforward task to do it on this online platform. And then, and I think this is why there is an exclamation mark, what is really new is that there's a universal 4-month submission period, which goes from March 1st to June 30 in each calendar year. So you as a member of the Global Compact, you have been used that your communication on progress was due depending on when you joined the UN Global Compact, then there was an option for a grace period if you did not manage to do it in time. And this is a major change, that there is a universal reporting period now, no matter when you joined the Global Compact, and with no explicit grace period any longer that you could request in advance. What is behind the experience shows that this is the period where all the data from the prior year is available. So this is why this period with mid of the year is quite long, to make sure that you have your environmental data in place, which is quite often a challenge to have them at the beginning of the year, but also to make sure that everybody reports more or less in a timely manner on recent data. And the fifth aspect I want to highlight here is the reduction of the non-communication period from 12 to now 6 months. This means that if you have not submitted your COP by the end of the year, this will result in a, how we say, delisting of the Global Compact. So to summarize this a bit, how a typical year looks like is that beginning with a calendar year, or better, beginning on the right-hand side in October, where we are right now, is this phase where you prepare for your reporting for the next year. This tends to go into January, February, collecting the data, collecting the information. Then you have this mentioned submission period tending from March to June. And then there's afterwards, yes, and I said it's, you really have to submit it, you have to submit it in this period. And if you do not do it, this will, yes, result in, is delisting the right word? Sorry, Fabian, I hope I put it exactly. And so after the submission period, you get the chance to compare yourself, to benchmark yourself. So all the information you will provide to the COP will be publicly available. And at the same time, you can compare yourself with other companies. There will be a dashboard. So this is really fosters the learning from others. So these are in quite short the 5 major changes compared to this standalone COP reporting as you're used to have. Is there? Yeah, Fabian, you were gonna tell me. So what are the key features? There are 5 key features. So first is the format, that it is submitted by a digital platform, and it requires 2 things: the CEO statement on the continuous support I mentioned, and the COP questionnaire. Attachments like your sustainability report are optional. You can upload them and make them publicly available. It is not mandatory.
Alexandra,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think your microphone shifted a little bit. We don't hear you.
Sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah, better.
Is it better now? Sorry for that.
And we handled the questions in the chat. Maybe about the recording and stuff.
So another important thing are the translations. So the questionnaire will be, or is available in all 6 official languages, which is Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. There are projects underway to add additional languages, and as I understood, German will be provided as well by you, but I'm not sure about the timeline. So, but the goal is that there might be a German version available as well. In terms of language for you, what does this mean? You are encouraged to answer in the same language as the questionnaire is when you're providing narrative components or text, but you may respond in any language. So you're not forced to do, but it increases comparability and fit to the language of the questionnaire. but you are free to answer in whatever language. Also important to know is that this questionnaire is really aligned with existing other reporting standards. So it was a huge interest in not inventing anything new, totally new, but to see, okay, there are standards like GRI, CDP, ISA, and see where they manage or where they support the reporting according to the principles of the UN Global Compact. And of course, it also respects the relevant framework like the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the ILO conventions, so that you are sure that you're aligned with the common sense and standards in reporting and sustainability performance. Yeah. And I will come back to this later, how you see where it is aligned and how you could use the other standards. And then the fifth feature is that the increased accessibility and data display, as I said, your answers to the questionnaire and the CEO statement are publicly available for download on the UN Global Compact website. Same applies to attachments. If you want to upload your sustainability report, this will be publicly available as well. And you will have access to a participant's visualization dashboard, sorry for that, where you can compare yourself and learn from the others. So two major requirements: the digitally signed statement by the chief executive expressing the continued support for the Global Compact. This is nothing new. You had to do this in the last years, but it's now formalized and it has a digital format. And the second is the completion of the questionnaire, demonstrating your commitment to the UN Global Compact, to the 10 principles, the SDGs. Both requirements need to be completed and submitted to the UN Global Compact website in the digital platform. So there's no email handing in, there is no letter post handing in. It's really this platform, and there will be an updated guidebook supporting you in this endeavor. And it's all done via the UN Global Compact platform that you are used to use already until now. So your login is still valid and you can just start from there. So taking a closer look in the CEO statement, it's quite straightforward. You access the CEO statement on the digital platform. You should clarify who will sign the statement, that it's possible to sign on behalf of the CEO. However, the name of the CEO will be shown on the statement, and then you provide a digital signature with name, position, and the company name. So on the right-hand side, you see a screenshot what it looks like, and so it's quite easy to fill out. So there's no need again in drafting any nice text on continuous support, but it's really to show, okay, we are still on board, we support the principles of the UN Global Compact, and our highest decision maker still supports it. And then the second and most important and more demanding part is the COP questionnaire. The questionnaire contains 52 to 74 questions that are connected to the 10 principles and the SDGs. Why is there a different amount of questions? This is because the answer of some questions prompts other questions, and there are parts in the questionnaire, I will come back to this later, that depend on the materiality, so that depend if the topic is relevant for your company. This accounts for the environmental topics, where there has been done like a pre-selection by sector, and this is valid for the human rights topics, where you are asked to do a materiality saliency assessment, and then this guides you through these questions. The questionnaire is organized into 5 sections. Approximately 2/3 are multiple choice matrix progression, and the other give way to insert either numbers or text. The 5 sections are structured as follows. So you have these overall governance section and the cross-cutting overview of your approach to, let's say, to sustainable development. I will work on this later, and then you have the topic and sector-specific sections on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. The structure of the sections are quite similar. So each section, the questions address your commitment, so the company's policy commitment in relation to the specific topic the section is about. It asks you about prevention tasks, so which type of actions you undertake with the aim of preventing, mitigating risks or increasing positive impacts associated with the specific topic, and also the engagement with stakeholders on this topic in the reporting period. The third part is your performance. So some sections ask you to insert specific KPI that are related to the specific topic, that are used to show your performance. And then the last section is your response to risk, your response to negative developments. Do you have any kind of remediation processes in place? And practical actions to implement the principles in the reporting period. So what is required by you to report on this topic? Important to know is that all questions need to be completed prior to submission. But also, as I mentioned already, it's not about scoring or ranking associated with the completion. So it's providing transparency of your performance, but there will be no rating, no direct benchmarking, no grading, A, B, C, D, you've done good, you've done bad. It's really to foster the insights for your stakeholders and to support you in acting according to the 10 principles. Data assurance is not mandatory, but it is encouraged, and you will have the option to insert if the data was ensured, but it's not mandatory at the moment. So now I will talk a bit about how to complete this questionnaire. First of all, of course, access it on the digital platform, complete it, and submit it. There are different types of questions that I want to show you. And one example is that you can select multiple answers. So good to know here. I said, I hope you can see it now. There are hyperlinks to reference standards and frameworks. In this case, in this question, it is said that it is aligned with the GRI disclosures to 12, to 14, to 22. And there's also a link that you can approach this information to see how to best align and to understand which they are referencing to. Then you get instructions on how to answer the question. In this case, you should select all that apply. If none of the answers apply, then you can select none of the above. But this asks you then to provide additional context or explanation, and you can insert this additional information in almost all sections of the question.
So sorry to interrupt again, Alexandra. I think the sound was again a bit blurry.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Maybe I'm moving too much. I know that I'm not. So I try to keep calm and quiet here.
Good now, thank you.
So there is another part of questions. These are these matrix questions. So there is the idea of a progress or higher performance in the answer options from the left to the right. So the left is the answer no, that is not a priority in this case. So this is about, it's not important to our company, but our performance is not very active either. And then it goes to the right-hand side to more mature management systems that are represented by these answers. Certain answer options may prompt additional questions, as I said, and this is indicated then, and then there will be a new field opening. You can also, there are questions that ask you for narrative formats, text boxes, and then there are quantitative questions as well. As you see here, there's a breakdown on male and female numbers regarding to different age groups and different hierarchy groups. And there you can also say not applicable to this quantitative data, but then you should provide a brief explanation, which is, for example, data is not existent, this topic is not material to us. I will come back to this materiality question later. Important for your preparation is you can download the CoP questionnaire as an Excel spreadsheet on the digital platform. So it supports you in drafting your answers, supports you in data collection if you want to send out the Excel in your company, or if you want to make sure to pre-populate these questions so that you have it easier. Then once accessing the questionnaire, the online version, you can really fill in everything. Nevertheless, it's possible to start compiling the information and then to save your intermediate status and work on the questionnaire on another day. So as long as you have not submitted to the UN Global Compact, you can still amend your answers. So with these formalities, I now want to switch to the sections of the questionnaire, but I don't know, do we have any formal questions that we should answer right now before I enter the content?
I think there are a couple of questions which we already could address right now. So for instance, there's one question which is about the timeline of the submission. So there is a participant who still has to submit a COP this year under the current format. And I think I'll go ahead and just answer that to you, Panajota. Thanks for the question. So you will have to submit your COP for this year in the narrative format, as well as the one for next year, so in the new format. So what we recommend is that if you already have a sustainability report from 2021 available, we recommend you to already submit it now, so that for 2023 you can complete the questionnaire with your new data. If the questions are like, if you need further clarifications on the answers, please always feel free to type it in the chat or quickly raise your hand to clarify. Then we have another question from Marie. This is about the data, so the data cycles. They are asking, so it seems to be that the data cycles, they will not be finished with data collection and verification of data by the end of the submission period in June. And they asked how we would suggest to handle this inconvenience. Alexandra, do you want to take this question? Or?
Yes, happy to do so. So there are two options. The first is to check why this is a challenge, and to year by year try to improve and speed up the data collection process, but this is the obvious one. The other one is that you should provide the most recent data possible. So in theory, you could refer to to the, how you say, the vorletzte, the year before the reporting period. However, we suggest to then maybe think about different end dates. So depending on if your financial years, for example, goes from March to March, you could also align your ESG year on that. It does not have to cover a calendar year. It has to cover a period of 12 months, of 12 consecutive months. And so maybe you find a period that is more adapted, that you are able to provide the data then by the end of June. Otherwise, you should state an omission or say you do not have the data available, but that's a pity if you have so much effort and you have the data assured. Yeah. So we will now cover the 5 sections, one after the other, and I'm going to start with the governance section. It's important that you demonstrate your system and process that you have in place to facilitate the implementation and strategies towards the 10 principles and the SDGs. And it's also aligned with current governance requirements by other standards. This information that your stakeholders want to understand, to get the confidence that your processes are in place, that you not just declare something or say that you want to reach something, but that gives the confidence that you're going to reach your goals. And as I said, all sections are built a bit similar. So it's about commitment, prevention, performance, and then the response and remediation. And as such, also the governance section starts with policies and responsibilities. Then asks, for example, of the role of the highest governance body regarding sustainability topics. The GRI reporters that are familiar with the standards 2021 know this. This is a mandatory question as well. They ask for publicly stated commitments towards sustainability topics. They ask about your code of conduct and its implementation, and about your sustainability governance. Then the prevention section has questions regarding your risk assessment, how you make sure that you are aware of sustainability related risks and the due diligence process you apply. Then the next section or part is about your internal and external reporting mechanisms. So do you have any grievance mechanisms in place, processes that allow stakeholders or individuals to raise concerns? And then in the end, your lessons regarding sustainability topics, your lessons learned. And the governance section, in addition, has specific information.
Sorry, Alexandra.
Yeah.
The sound is again. So I've heard, I've got the tip that it might be helpful if you put the microphone a little bit above the mouth. Like
okay, thank you. Okay, so I hope. Sorry to bother you with all this noise. So thank you.
I'm sorry for the interruption.
Just go ahead. It does not make sense if you do not hear what I'm talking about. So the governance section has three additional performance questions. This is about the executive pay. So it asks if there are parts of the executive pay linked to sustainability performance. It asks about the board composition in terms of diversity aspects. And it asks about your sustainability and reporting and data assurance practices beyond the CoP. So if you're reporting in addition to specific frameworks and regulations, and if you have your report or parts of the report data externally assured. So these are the specific questions or parts of the governance section. I want to explain some terms that we met, and the first is the due diligence. which is a process that focuses on identify, prevent, mitigate, remediate, and account for negative impacts that your company could have on people and the environment. It's important, it's not just risk assessment, because the risk assessment focuses on the sustainability risks and address how these to put it other way, if you're talking about internal risk assessment, so it's also that risks to the outside, but also the risks that your company might face. And here the due diligence is really focusing on your outward negative impacts and how you deal with them. So raising concerns, I said it already, it's the process through which individuals can raise concerns about your behavior, of your company's behavior, your business conduct. So this is typically whistleblowing hotlines or confidential interviews during site visits. A grievance mechanism goes beyond, because this is a routinized process through which individuals can raise grievances, but also seek remediation. There are state-based processes, but they can also be voluntary processes. They can be internal and external processes, but this is not just about, okay, I have an issue, I want to raise it, but also to seek remedy for it and to get a kind of compensation out of it. So tips for preparation for this section. So it's really important that you involve the relevant departments to complete this governance section. And this is not just the sustainability department, but it's first of all, it's human resources. It might be your compliance and legal department, and definitely also your risk management that has the oversight how you integrate ESG risks in your overall company risk management and how you deal with these adverse impacts that your company might have on the environment and on society. The second is, if you already have conducted a materiality analysis, makes sense to map these material topics through the 4 sections of the questionnaire, the 4 sections of these, or 4 categories, the principles of the UN Global Compact, to then have it easier during the reporting process to allocate the information. If not already the case, it's helpful to set up a data collection system and make sure that it captures for the governance section also this percentage of individuals, and of course this accounts for the other sections as well, to make sure that the required KPIs by the CoP are integrated into your data collection system. For GRI reporters, helpful to align with the information you're providing in G2 and the general disclosures about your company, because there's a strong consistency between what CoP requires and what GRI Standards 2021 ask companies to report. And then, of course, in the beginning, decide whether you want to assure the information by a third party. And as we heard, this requires additional time. So it's also the question about starting early with the process to make sure that you are able to finish it when it is due. And it's encouraged by the Global Compact, but not mandatory. So this is about this introductory section and about first steps to set up your answers to the section. Do you have specific questions on this section at the moment before I proceed with the human rights section?
Currently, no specific question on the governance section.
Okay. So happy to proceed with the human rights section. So Every section is structured a bit different, but it still has these 4 major parts that I mentioned before. Here, the human rights section is about that you demonstrate that you have a responsibility to respect human rights, to address negative impacts related to your business operations, but this also includes a view on your entire supply chain. So really the potential adverse negative effects you have directly, indirectly through your business model, so to say. So the structure of the human rights section starts with a materiality or saliency section. And this is really to show which of the human rights topics, which are quite many now. So we all know that I think it's about more than 30 potential human rights topics. So it's about asking which of these are material and which overall are material topics for your company, and what are salient human rights that you put into focus for your not just for your reporting, but mainly put in focus in your human rights related activities. Then it's about the commitment, whether you have a human rights policy, how mature it is. Then it is about prevention. There is parts about stakeholder engagement, how you cooperate with stakeholders, which actions you take to prevent and to mitigate negative effects. Do you have any training procedures in place, trainings on some topics, or who is addressed by these trainings? Is it for certain groups of your company? Is it for everybody? And also kind of progress assessment of your human rights performance. However, there are no specific indicators that are required by our companies, because it's very much depends on the salient issues you have identified. But the reader or should get the conviction that you have some kind of progress assessment in place that convinces the stakeholders, but also yourself, that you are on the right track, that you make sure that your actions have the targeted outcomes. And then the response, your response to negative human rights impacts. Do you have remediation processes in place? Do you have additional actions and goals regarding human rights that you want to report upon, or that you can mention in this COP? So you see it summarized. So there is again an explanation of terms. Material topics. These are the topics that represent your potential most significant impacts on economy, environment, and the people. It's highly recommended to align with GRI 3, which gives an explanation on how to identify material topics, to do an impact assessment along your value chain, to make sure that you consider the scope, the scale, and the remediability or irremediability of negative impacts, but also take into consideration positive impacts. So it's strongly encouraged to align with GRI here. However, it's not mandatory, but you should have a kind of materiality process in place. The impact I mentioned already is the effect that you potentially or actually have on people, environment, economy, including human rights, of course. And then, yes, human rights, it refers to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As I said, there are many human rights that could be relevant for your company. So really take a closer look if you addressed all in your risk saliency assessment and your materiality assessment, to be confident that you approach or tackle these that are relevant for your company. So again, preparation tips for this section: identify your material topics by assessing their impact impacts through a materiality assessment. As I said, take a look into your I3.2 for guidance. Make sure that you cover in your materiality process all potentially relevant topics of the CoP, because these are the principles of the UN Global Compact, and at least these topics you should cover in a materiality assessment. There might be other additional topics as well. Consider the entire value chain. This is really important to see what is upstream, what is in our own operations, and what happens downstream. So it's the idea of taking responsibility along the value chain with different degrees, of course, but being aware that you have potential positive and negative impacts along the entire value chain and how you deal with them. Involve your most affected stakeholders to validate your assessment is highly recommended, and also consider the requirements of other potential regulations. So if you fall, for example, or will fall under the reporting obligations in the EU and under the CSRD, so do it at the same moment. You can use the results for the CoP reporting, but as well of to address the other reporting requirements. For the Swiss companies, check if you fall under the scope regarding minerals and metals stemming from conflict regions or in the child labor, to make sure that you have this integrated into your materiality assessment as well, and make sure then when reporting about human rights to addressing these topics as well. So this is about the section about human rights, which I said is a specific section since it asks at the beginning about your materiality there. So it's not that that it is expected that every company, no matter which size, which sector, has the same issues here. So it's a personalized approach. Do you have questions to the human rights section at the moment?
Yes, we do have a question from Thomas. So he says, but if you want to do this in a serious approach, the materiality assessment, I assume, March would not be realistic if you do not have a solid basis already. Do you have a recommendation how to handle this?
I'm sorry, what was the beginning? So that you need more time, or that
yes.
you can, yeah.
To do this realistically, if you do not have a solid basis, March would not be feasible.
Okay, yes, now I understood. So this is, if you remember, I showed this entire life cycle, let's say, of the calendar year. And that's true. If you start right now, it would be still feasible to run a materiality assessment to, let's say, to 3 to 4 months. It's quite enough to run it. But of course, you will not be able to address these material topics in detail then till March. But there is always the option to declare that probably you identified 3 to 4 topics that are without any doubt, and then explain that at the moment you're not ready, but give an additional comment. We're going to run a materiality assessment and then improve your reporting in the next year. As I said, it's not about a ranking or scoring, so be open. It's really about understanding where you are. It's about encouraging you to go a step further. And this includes to say, okay, we understand we have to do it. This is our next task. We are going to do it, but not to prevent or do any quick fix, because then in the end, you will always have this, let's say, wrong materiality assessment, which does not help you to improve your management systems, and which does not help you to tackle the pressing topics. So this would be my recommendation here. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I think it's really important to say that this first time to fill out this questionnaire will be challenging for many of you, and then you may think you have a lot of gaps, but the aim of the questionnaire is really to show you where you stand and to allow you to make progress in the coming years. So yes, it can be that there are sections where you currently cannot provide data or do not have policies in place, for instance. I think that was the only question to this section.
Okay. So I'm going to proceed to the labor topics. Here it's about to respect and uphold the fundamental universally accepted labor rights across your own operations, but also along the value chain. There might be a certain overlapping with human rights issues, since labor rights issues are also human rights issues, or at least part of them. In this case, you are to a certain extent free on in which section you want to report it. But nevertheless, here the focus is really about, it's like a deep dive on labor issues, even if we are aware that it partially belongs to human rights. And this section again is similarly structured. So it's about, do you have any policy on labor topics? Do you have a formal commitment or not a formal commitment? It's about prevention and of negative impacts in terms of, do you engage with stakeholders? Do you have actions in place, mitigation actions in place with your suppliers as well? Because as I said, it's not just about your own operations, but it's about your suppliers, but it's also downstream in your value chain. Do you have training procedures in place? And do you have a formalized progress assessment? So this is similar as in the other topic section. Then there is a more specific required performance reporting, and this covers the KPI percentage of women in leadership, the pay ratio between men and women, but it also covers occupational health and safety issues. So it's about injury frequency reporting, about incident rate reporting, and about collective bargaining agreements. Again, those GRI reporters that might join the call, they will it will sound familiar to them. First of all, the collective bargaining agreement, but also the occupational health and safety topics. And then again, there's the section about response and reporting. So asking about remediation processes in place and additional actions and goals, externally or internally, that you have committed to and that you want to share with your reader. So again, it's these 4 steps, but with a quite specific section on performance reporting here. Therefore, it's important to understand what is really meant. So work-related injuries are any extra, let's say, visible fractures, burns, loss of consciousness, so really injuries that are connected to your activities on the workplace, including death. So this is important to know. Incidents is the occasion where these injuries happen. So it's the occurrence, expected or unexpected, and covers also injuries and diseases. So the first one is really what happens, and the incident is the occasion when it happens. So if you start counting, these are 2 different things. Collective bargaining agreements, as I said, most of you might be familiar from GRI reporting, but this is formalized agreements with unions, with workers' organizations that determine the working conditions, terms of employment. I'm aware that there are many, that there are sectors in Switzerland with pretty good labor conditions that nevertheless do not have collective bargaining agreements. Again, it's on, do you allow it? It's on transparency, but it's not to be understood as a rating in this sense. Preparation tips for this: calculation of women in senior leadership positions asks you somehow obvious to see how many women and how many men are in senior leadership level and non-executive board positions per the total number of employees in this position. It's important that you find an internal definition what you consider senior leadership and align these to these explanations here. Pay equity, it's usually done by gross hourly earnings paid to female employees versus paid to male for each job level and category. So this is obvious that it pretty much depends on comparable levels or of responsibility. And then you're asked to calculate the frequency of injury, and here it comes that it's the number of recordable injuries per total hours worked in the reporting period. So this requires that you have a system in place that define from which level on you consider an injury, that counts these injuries and puts it in relation to the total numbers, total work, performance of your employees. The incident rate, and this is why I said there's a difference between injuries and incidents, is calculated by the total number of lost days per hours worked. So this is really how much time is how we say lost is a bit negative, but how much time have your employees suffered, let's say, from incidents and were not able to deliver their work as they are supposed to because of these incidents. Do you have questions on this?
It is, there's a question not specifically on the labor section, but it fits quite well because it's the question is for data. Can you link to your sustainability report? Can you link to the data section just your sustainability report, or do you need to write down the data?
You need to write down the data. So it's about copy and paste. Make sure that you have the same type of calculation, preferably in your sustainability report. It makes it easier. Otherwise, it could be that you have different definitions of KPI, and this is why you should insert the data in the questionnaire, because it's important that it's comparable. And yeah, that's the answer.
And then there have
copy and paste.
There have been several questions on the Excel. So for your information, the Excel sheet, which is the same as the questionnaire in PDF that we have currently on the website, will be distributed soon. This is we have one available in case you already want to start, but it will be the one that we have used in this 2022 pilot year. So minor changes or between the current Excel and the one that you will receive in due course. I think it should be distributed with you all within this month. And also with regard to that Excel, unfortunately, it is now possible to just upload the completed Excel sheet, and it will not automatically translate your answers in the Excel, but you really have, as Alexandra mentioned, to copy paste this. I also do not anticipate that we will have this in the next 2 years. But hopefully we will have this at a later stage. Would be actually quite nice. And I think with that we can go to the environmental section.
Thank you, Fabian. Yes, so the environmental section is first of all that you show your efforts how you prevent from environmental damage, that you measure your impacts, but also say how you make sure that you integrate environmental topics in your product and service development, not just again focus on operations, but also along the value chain, and with a specific notion also on your products and services you offer. As I mentioned already, it's important this section contains sector-specific environmental questions. So depending on which sector you're in, you will have different questions or sections that you are asked concerning water, concerning environment, concerning biodiversity.
I don't know, Joanna, but you've got a good roof there.
Okay.
It would.
Seen that depending on your business model, these topics are either material or not. The structure, again, it starts with a commitment, with a policy. If you have a policy in place, related to the relevant environmental topics, how you prevent and respond to negative effects. It's again on stakeholder engagement, on prevention mitigation actions, but also how you progress. You assess your progress, and including, have you set goals and targets? The remediation, if there is a process in place, and additional actions and goals. So it again covers these aspects and has a specific question again on a specific KPI section. Here, for example, the one on climate action, energy use and technology. And there is a set of data required. So it asks you about your GHG emission, but also the percentage of revenue invested in R&D on low carbon products and services. This is what I said, it's the stewardship with respect to products and services that is expressed by the investment in the further development of these products. Your support of climate change adaptation measures, your share of renewable energy consumption, the revenue from low carbon products and services. And here it's recommended to align with the EU taxonomy, since this is a current system of deciding which products and services are to be considered low carbon. There might also be, you might have internal definitions, and then you should mention this in the comment section to explain the reader which share of your revenue you consider to be low carbon. And then, as I said, sector-specific questions on water, waste, biodiversity and air pollution. Maybe I was not clear at the beginning, so that the climate topic is considered to be relevant or material for almost all companies or for all companies. You always have the option to say it's not applicable to us, but then you should really have a good explanation why this is not the case. So we expect all companies reporting on GHG. This is very much in line with the current legislation or the upcoming legislation. And then to report on additional information, sector-specific information. Again, an explanation of terms now in the environment sector. So the climate change, adaptation and resilience. This focuses already on the on the fact that it might not be possible to totally prevent from climate change. We see it at the moment. So it's also about how you adapt and how resilient you are with regard to climate change issues. Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, Scope 3 emissions, you find the definitions here. I think this is quite common knowledge right now. Tips for preparation, however, are, sorry that I will come back to this, that you apply the GHG protocol, or this is required, which explains in more depth the Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. I did not repeat this here, the climate facts. Important here, makers are familiar with the sector-specific.
Sorry, Alexandra.
Yeah. Again,
yeah.
Sorry, I don't know. Okay. So make yourself familiar with the sector-specific questions, that you prepare properly for them, to see if you need additional data and information that you might not have been aware that you should report it. select not applicable if the topic, nevertheless, you belong to the sector, you consider is not material for your specific company, but explain why. And this brings us back to the materiality process in the beginning. If you can show you ran this materiality process, you noted that, for example, in biodiversity, no matter your company in scope, you do not have potential negative impacts with regard to biodiversity, then you could reference to your materiality assessment and explain that you consider this is not applicable for your company. Refer to the GHG protocol. I mentioned this to calculate your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Calculation of their R&D investment, is the R&D budget allocated to the low carbon products and services. So this is a challenge. I'm a rare reference or hint to reference to the EU taxonomy or other classification systems. And for the topic specific questions, check to the GRI topic standards, since the requirements on the topics on the sector specific questions are very much aligned with the GRI, with the corresponding GRI indicators or disclosures. So then you can check there if you want to know more about how to report on water and effluents, how to report on biodiversity. So this, as I said in the beginning, it's not in communication and progress has not invented anything new, but aligns current standards and practices. Do you have questions on the environmental section?
Not on the environmental specifically, but I think it makes sense since we have it here now a bit more specific. There was a question on whether the questionnaire is GRI aligned, and I think you have already showed us that well. So yes, the COP questionnaire is aligned with relevant international standards, and it also does cross-reference these where relevant. So it's aligned with CDP, GRI, TCFD, and it does show you in particular the GRI you will see throughout the questionnaire. And I think a follow-up question on that is whether it is possible to just submit GRI contents reported already on similar topics.
This is only possible if you cover all relevant topics, because you know GRI has also this materiality idea in place. You can state omissions in GRI, and then you should state these omissions also in the COP. And again, it's not, you at least have to copy and paste and see how it fits in. It's not possible to, for example, upload your GRI content index or something that way, but you really have to do this mapping on where to fill the information. And as you see, there are some, as Fabian said, it's aligned to different standards, but not exclusively to GRI. So for example, the KPI on R&D investment would be one that is not typically included in GRI. So even if you have a GRI report, check if you have all relevant information in place and make sure that you collect this additional information COP requires, to make sure that you cover all sections. I'm working with many companies, and for example, the anti-corruption topic is a typical one that is underreported, but you are asked here to report on it. It's similar on human rights reporting. It now improves with GRI standards 2021, but the old GRI standard did not so specifically focus on, do you have due diligence, do you have saliency assessment made. And so I would say GRI gives you 3/4 probably, but make sure that you collect the additional information needed.
Thank you. I think we can move to the next section and then take the other questions at the end.
So let me move to the last section, the anti-corruption section. So it's here about proactively demonstrating that you do not tolerate any dishonest behavior, frauds that would undermine a fair competition between companies, but also report on how you do you have any corrective action taken should an incident arise, because what we meet quite often is that there is a code of conduct, that there are some measures in place, but that there is no performance measurement or reporting or checking if these great policies really work out and if they really prevent from corruption. It's difficult, I know, but nevertheless. So again, it's about, do you have any commitments in place with regard to prevention, corruption prevention, which actions you do to prevent from corruptions, do you work with stakeholders, etc. And how is your performance? And there's one performance KPI, and this is reporting on the incidents of corruption that have that happened during the reporting year. And again, if you are aware of any incidents, how do you respond? How do you report? Do you have additional goals and targets in this year? Yes, sorry, by prevention, it's also the training I did not mention additionally, because we see this quite often, that there are trainings in place. It's also important to see, are they addressed for certain specific employee groups, for everybody, give context information there. So again, an explanation of terms, it's asked whether you have an anti-corruption program in place, and such a program includes different procedures, also asked or would mean that you have like a responsible person in place who is responsible for implementing and continuously improving such a program. A program would also mean that you have some anti-corruption commitments communicated to your business partners internally, provide training. So this is quite similar again to, if you're familiar with GRI, there is the question about the occupational health and safety management system, and it's similar to a management system. The question, do you have a program? A program is not just a policy, but the entire set or bundle of measures to make sure, or to make the best, to your knowledge, sure that corruption will not take place in your company. Collective action is if you work together with any stakeholders or initiatives to combat corruption. So this very much is born by the understanding that you can have your own mechanisms in place. However, if you are active in an area or sector where there's a high risk of corruption and of not fair competition, so it's important to work with the entire system and to join initiatives to move forward the entire sector and not just your company. So tips for preparation here, anti-corruption is typically somehow based in the legal and compliance department or HR. Check if you are already providing information in your annual report, because this is a topic that is quite often covered in the annual report. If you have data in this report already, so you do not have to collect it additionally from the sustainability department, let's say. Check on the completeness of your code of conduct if you have one, and see if it references also to the value chain. And check, as I said before, do you have any systems in place to monitor application and breaches of code of conduct? This is quite often pretty weak still. check if you have regular trainings, and as I said, is there a risk-based approach? So are there parts of your company that might be of more risk of corruption? So do these persons, for example, get a bit more specific training, more specific guidance? What should I do if I have the feeling that I have to bribe or whatever to win this project? So really guide your people that are at risk how to deal with these topics. So this is again a topic that's important to make sure that your internal mechanisms are in place, and then it's easy to report on that. But as for all topics, you can also be transparent if you are not ready or if you're still on your way to establish such an anti-corruption program. So having said that, I guided you through the 5 sections of this questionnaire. We saw that they have a similar structure, that some are more specific with regard to KPIs, with regard to required specific information. And that's always, let's say, a dependency between your performance and the reporting. And as I continuously said, it's about transparency and about bringing you forward, but not about judging. And yes, having said that, we would be at the question. We will still have time for questions and answers that might have arisen or still open.
Yes, indeed. We have also still quite some technical questions. I would quickly go over this if that is all right, because if I'm not mistaken, you would have one additional slide then as well, or 2 slides.
Yes.
All right. So there has been a question on. One question has been on the submission period. Someone has found that I believe in the FAQ sheet, it says it is between March till end of May. And we have had said this. No, this is not your mistake. It's in our FAQs, which we still need to adapt them. Because it is indeed, we have adapted it. It's now from March till end of June, not end of May. We will flag this back. So thank you. There has been a question on whether subsidiaries that are part of the UN Global Compact via their parent company, whether they need to submit a communication on progress. I believe this question has been from you, Regula. So for your particular case, no, you do not have to submit the communication on progress. This will be done by your parent company. It depends a little bit. If you as a subsidiary have a profile on the UN Global Compact website, then yes, you will need to submit the new communication on progress as you have done in the years before. So there are no changes. You will, if you have had to submit beforehand, you will also have to submit in 2023. But the subsidiary policy remains the same. And there has also been a question whether it's possible while answering the questionnaire, whether this has to be done in one go or whether you can take breaks. Yes, you can take breaks. It will save your intermediate steps. And then, if I'm not mistaken, there's been one question that reached me in private mode, whether it makes sense to start now and then publish it in 2023. It was from a new joiner. So yes, as Alexander has showed you in the beginning of the slides, it makes sense to start the data collection process right now, to have a look at the questionnaire, get familiar with it, with the question, and what information you will need to collect to answer the questions, or what data you already have, or processes for data collection. And then you may publish, and to publish it in 2023. Also important to say, new joiners that join in Q3, Q4 of this year have the option to, while they have to submit the questionnaire and the statement on continued support by the highest executive level, they have the option to disclose it in private mode, so it would not be available on the Young Global Compact website for this first year. This will also be the approach that we will have in the coming years. So if someone is joining in Q3, Q4, they have for the first time the option to use the private mode. And I believe there has been another question on whether the Young Global Compact index in the annual report is still a requirement. No, this will no longer be a requirement by us. Nevertheless, and you may add there, Alexandra, if you want to, we still recommend to display it because it can be helpful for your stakeholders. Yeah, and then I think we have also had a feedback by Thomas. I'm sorry, in looking at the time, I will not go in depth, but we have taken feedback, and it's a valuable feedback. I think this is also why the Global Compact team has made great efforts to align it with current standards. But we can also have a bilateral conversation about this. And with that, I'll give back to you, Alexandra.
Yes, I just want to summarize somehow how to proceed. So I did not want to interrupt questions for the last slide, but yes, we heard that the new joiners will require to submit in the following year. Yes, I want to say that this is fine already. Sorry, I'm just jumping. So looking at this calendar year again, so we are right now in the suggested preparation phase, so make yourself familiar with the required disclosures, attend the information sessions, what you're doing right now. On the next slides, you will also find links to other sessions that already took place, to additional informations. Download the Excel spreadsheet once available. Important for the reporting process, complete the online questionnaire, sign the CEO statement, and then really double check the provided information, the answers. Once you submitted your COP, it is submitted. So there is no formal way of amend it in the following months. There is an amendment phase of 2 weeks. But this is really on formalities, requesting minor changes in case of errors, but not meant to, okay, we have new data, we would phrase this sentence a bit differently. It's really for the urgent cases, formal cases. And so really double check before you click on the submission. As Fabian said, you have all the time during this period to amend, to work on the questionnaire. You do not have to do it in one way. You can also open to somebody else, having a double check, probably involve an additional person that you read through this through your answers. But then once submitted, it should be really ready for submission. And then this benchmarking, suggested benchmarking phase, utilize your dashboard to visualize your performance, to see what other tools compare the progress against your peers. And then we discussed this already, use the most recent data, and important, there's no formal grace period or extensions, as you have been used to. It's really the submission period. And that is to respect. And so it's the here you find additional information. You will get the slides as well. There you find easy access to questions, to the questionnaire, to the guidebook, and whenever questions arise in terms of formalities, how to proceed, please refer to Fabian and the team, to the Global Compact Network, that are happy to help you how to proceed forward.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. We have received, and we will be here if you have further questions, because we have almost reached the end of the 1.5 hours. But yeah, we're here. If you need to leave, please leave. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Alexandra, for your insightful inputs and all the explanations.